My name is Malcolm Lilienthal. I'm a mental health therapist, coach, and the creator of the Titan Blueprint, where we break down patterns that shape your thoughts, emotions, and identity. In this video, I'm gonna go over a few things that I go over with educationally with all of my clients. And I just want to share it with you guys to see what you guys think and see if this helps you practically in your life. How I talk about this with my clients is usually something happens in our life, like some kind of event, we'll say. And a lot of times, what I say is an event is, we're going to say, neither good or bad. Okay. An event is just neutral. There's no good or bad to it. Okay. An event could be like, I was rear ended. An event could be something like, while I'm doing this video, because I'm doing it on my phone, I could get interrupted right now with a phone call about, let's say, my parents were in a car accident or something like that. And I'm not going to go through grief because of their death or because they died. I'm going to go through grief because of my interpretation of what their death means to me. Does that make sense? And maybe for some of you that sounds robotic, or it may sound like someone doesn't care. But what I'm trying to get you to do is separate reality from interpretation. According to science, we don't really know what reality actually is. There was a guy named Immanuel Kant. You can look him up. Immanuel, and then his last name, I believe, is spelled Kant. And he coined the terms phenomenon and nomenon. And we don't talk about nomenon that much, just like we don't talk about Bruno. So I'm sorry. But the nomenon itself is the thing in and of itself. Okay. And then the phenomenon, he said, was the thing that we perceive. So basically, I don't know what the nomenon is. That's what reality actually is. But I don't know what that is. All I know is the forms that arrive in my mind. And that's when you get into like string theory and quantum physics and just quantum theory in general. I'm submitting to you today that we experience events, or events happen, and they're neither good or bad. Okay. What happens is we make interpretations. So we make interpretations about the event through what? Our thought life. So we have these thoughts. Okay. And right now they're saying about 60 to 70,000 thoughts go across our awareness each and every day. And if you're not aware of them, for example, if you're thinking the same way today that you were yesterday, then for the most part, you're just going to keep creating the same life over and over again. So, because according to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, the way that you think determines the way that you feel, determines the way you behave, determines your character, and your character is how people know you. And your character ultimately determines where you end up in life. You could say your destiny. So, we first have a thought, okay? We have a thought, and then that thought leads to a feeling. But that's not how I grew up. I grew up hearing from my parents, "You're making me mad," which then in turn taught me that other people have control over how I feel. And then I grow up with that misconception, like everyone is in charge of how I feel. You see what I'm saying? Now, that doesn't mean that somebody could say something to me and I don't feel some kind of way. What I'm saying is I'm putting it in the right categories. I'm putting it accurately, how it formulates or how it gets conditioned inside of us. So we have these thoughts, but about an event, and we interpret the event. Now we're going to label it good, bad, safe. Now we're going to put all these on it. You see what I'm saying? So we have a thought that generates a feeling. The feeling then generates a behavior. So, so we write behavior like this. a feeling generates a behavior. The behavior then reinforces the original thought. You see what I'm saying? Now let's go even further. How do I get from here to here? I do that in what they call my imagination. Okay. And in my imagination is where I make my interpretations. Okay. And now in my imagination, I'm either going to be thinking worst case scenario or best case scenario. So I could put B, WCS, and BCS. Worst case scenario, best case scenario. Worst case scenarios where I catastrophize and I it's like that commercial mayhem. Best case scenario is, when it comes to the best case scenario, it's really difficult to really to be in that state. I would say it's difficult because it's always in the unknown, right? The brain is a prediction machine. It needs to know something. That's how it works. And that's exactly why that was exactly why the tree, the knowledge of good and evil, was so important in the story of Genesis, is because now we get to choose and we get to make up what's good and evil for us. God already established what was good and evil. In fact, I submit to you that Adam and Eve could have just asked him instead of trying to get it for themselves, because every time we try to get it for ourselves, it always leads to destruction. That's what Proverbs tells us. There's a way that seems right unto a man. I'm either thinking worst or best case scenario. I'm What about this question? How come we always think about or overthink the worst case scenario? Why don't we ever overthink the best case scenario? Just try it and see what happens. What is the worst that could happen if you thought about the best case scenario in all aspects of your life? And I also will submit to you that this simply means I want a predictable outcome. I'm talking about fear. I want a predictable outcome for an experience that I haven't had yet. Does that make sense? The same thing with faith is, but in faith, I'm going to say what that predictable outcome is. So, for example, I'm not going to wait for abundance to feel abundant. I'm going to generate what it would feel like to feel abundant now before it happens. I'm not going to wait for my healing to feel whole. I'm going to feel what it would feel like to be whole today. So that why? Because I'm preparing my nervous system on how to feel ahead of the experience. I hope that makes sense, because it's like we already do it in the opposite way. So for example, sometimes in my sessions I'll say to people, do you meditate? And they'll say, I don't have time to meditate. Or do you want to learn how to meditate? And they'll tell me they don't have time to meditate. And I'll say, you're already meditating. You're already doing it. You do it on the worst case scenario. Instead of meditating on what could go wrong, why don't we ever meditate on what could go right? So in our imagination, we're either moving towards fear or faith. I would submit to you that both of these are the same thing. And I would also submit to you that these map beautifully to when I talked about in my video of primal state of being and powerful state. Why? This would be sympathetic nervous system or flight or fight. This would be parasympathetic nervous system or rest and relaxation. So in my imagination, if I'm thinking worst case scenario, I'm going to feel in relationship to that. So that could look like sad, angry, depressed, negative feelings, which is going to bring me to a choice. Okay. Am I going to yell at someone? Am I going to shut down? Am I going to dismiss? Am I going to, cuss someone out? Am I going to hide? Am I going to hit? What is my behavior going to look like? Am I going to cry? What is my behavior going to look like? And it's usually going to match how I was feeling, and how I was feeling is going to match what I was thinking about. And what I was thinking about is going to match the interpretation I gave the event. So sometimes people come to me because they were in a car accident and they say, I can't now they can't drive to work no more. They're afraid to get into a car. And every time they see a white car, because that was what hit them, they have a panic attack while they're driving. So it makes sense that they would be scared to not drive anymore. So now they're Ubering or they're asking for a ride. And it doesn't make any sense anymore to them because they're spending a lot of money that they don't necessarily have to. So then they come to me, and then I got to figure out what's the interpretation that they assigned to the event of what happened to them. And once I get them to eradicate that lie, then they can make better choices. You see what I'm saying? From behavior to thought is an experience. I don't want to put my butt to you guys, but I got to do that just to write experience. I move from thought to feeling to behavior, but I do that through my imagination, my choices, and my experiences. My experience is going to always validate the original thought. Now, what drives my thoughts are my core beliefs. Here's where it gets really interesting, because what you believe at the core of you is going to drive your thoughts, or what you pay attention to. Now, I want you guys to Google this um, part of the brain called I'm running out of room, called the reticular activating system. Now, this part in us, I would say this part probably sits a little bit right behind our frontal lobe. I could be mixing up some parts of the brain, but this part right sits like really in between the frontal lobe and your limbic system. So if this is if that's the brain, then your limbic system would be here, your frontal lobe would be here, and that reticular part would be, but it's not just nested there. It's like a hairnet. It's tendrils all across the brain, because what it's doing is it regulates a lot of things like sleep and stuff. But one thing that I really pay attention to it about is the information we take in. This thing filters the information. So you might say to somebody, how come you're always seeing the negative in everything? You see what I'm saying? And some people have a hard time seeing the positives and stuff. And it's because their reticular activating system, let me make it more plain. Look up this word, Bader Meinhof, or you could look up frequency illusion. So let's say I go to get a new car today. Let's call it a Toyota Camry, and all of a sudden I get this car. Not all of a sudden, but I go purchase the car, and now all of a sudden I see this car everywhere. And now my brain's paying attention to all the Camrys on the road all of a sudden. So whatever car you bought, I want you to think back to when you bought it and ask yourself how you started to see it everywhere. Like, does everybody have the same car as me? But it's not the case. It's kind of even how you're listening to me right now, and you're not paying attention to your ankle or your wrist. There are many things happening in the world as far as stimulus is concerned that our five senses could pick up as far as data, but this part filters only what's important to us. So if negativity, like maybe you may score high in neuroticism, but maybe so negativity is more important to you because that's what you focus on. Think of this like your own algorithm where it'll keep feeding you more information like that. And that's how we get what they call biased, to the point where we can't even see outside the way we think. So now my partner comes to me and says, hey, I want to talk to you. I immediately think the worst. You see what I'm saying? So we have our events. Remember, the event is neither good or bad. And our thoughts, we usually use our imagination to interpret the event. Okay. And this becomes a cycle. Now, this is not necessarily in order, because what happens is by the time we're 35, all we are is a set of unconscious habits, hardwired attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions that function like a computer program. And so humans think there's something special, and I'm not saying that in a like a cynical kind of way. Like, we really pride ourselves in being individualistic, but I'm a submit to you that TikTok has shown us that we're kind of all living the same life. There are experiences you have that you thought were unique to you, and then this platform kind of shows you we're pretty much all thinking the same way. You see what I'm saying? Now, yeah, there are outliers and stuff like that, but for the most part, we think, we feel, we behave, we think, we feel, we behave, and we keep that cycle going. So if you keep that same energy going, that same cycle going, those same habits going, they become strongholds or they become habits. And a habit is when you've done something so many times that your body knows how to do it better than your mind. And so all of what we do gets conditioned, and then we think we're making conscious choices. Even with advertisements, no matter what we're doing, we think we're intentional in our lives. Intentionality looks like you and your significant other sitting down on your anniversary and not just going to dinner, but recapping the entire previous year to make sure you're on track to your goals, the goals that you set for your entire family. That's what you do at that when you go out, and you go out and you sit down and you map out, what are we going to do in the following year? And you keep doing that to stay on track. That's living intentionally. And you might say that's a lot of work, but I guarantee you won't have to worry about if this person's paying attention anymore, or if this person loves you, or 20 years down the line, you're getting a divorce and you thought everything was fine. You see what I'm saying? It's very similar to if I make a plan, like, how much money do I want to spend at the end of the month when I retire? Or how much money do I want to have to spend? Like, do I want 5 grand? Do I want 6 grand? I do have to account for inflation, because the 6 grand I can spend today is not going to be the same 20 years from now when I retire. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, if I live intentionally, I'm going to create a goal, and then each day, every time I make a decision, should be in relation to that further goal. So if you want to take your family to the next level, you could create a mission statement for your family. You could create a vision statement for your family, a logo for your family, and then some goals and stuff like that. So when you tell your family, we're making these decisions because of these goals and our mission and our vision we have for our family. And then it's not like you're making these random goals, but you're actually living according to the plan that you have. And of course, it's a living document, so it's not the end all be all. You can make amendments to it. So that's when you would make an amendment, like on your anniversaries and stuff like that. Or maybe you sit down as a family and you come up with the goals, like with your teenagers and your little ones. Don't, like, include them all. It doesn't matter how young they are. Include them all in the thing and make a logo, mission, a vision statement, and plan your life out. Plan it out. And I understand that sometimes life happens, but a lot of times when you plan things out and you have a plan and you stay according to the plan, it doesn't matter what happens in life. If you stay to the plan, you'll reach your goals. You see what I'm saying? But if you're not careful, a thought that leads to a feeling, that leads to a behavior, that reinforces the original experience, that reinforces the original thought. Now I'm back in my imagination. These same things will keep creating the same life over and over again, and it becomes cyclical. And that's when we get tired of being tired, and we're numb because we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we're not seeing the results that we would like to see because we keep returning to familiar states that don't talk about our future. You see what I'm saying? So this is what I wanted to submit to you. I hope you got something out of this. And always remember that titans aren't born, they're forged.